Gutter! It's a gutter! My name is Barbara McBride-Smith. Welcome to my house in Jonesboro, Tennessee. It's a cold day here while I'm recording this story, and so I'm bundled up in my down vest, keeping warm in my basement. I wish I were at Camp Bethel in April with all of you who also wish you were there, but we can't be, not this year, maybe another time. Today, while I'm telling this story, I'm being joined by a new friend of mine. He's right behind me here. You see, during this pandemic, I've taken up a new pastime, quilting. I'm not very good at it, but I'm learning, and it's teaching me patience. So this guy behind me, he's my new rainbow zebra quilt, and he'll be here for this story. I hope he's not too distracting. The people that I grew up around believe that the finest food in the world is funeral food. You see, we honor those who have died by feeding those who are grieving. Now that brings up a point that I feel like I need to make, and it's this. Hardly anybody uses the word died anymore. Mostly what I hear and what I read is passed. She passed, he passed away, they've passed on. Now, there's nothing wrong with that word, pass. It's a good word, but it's a euphemism, and I don't like it. I figure I'm old enough now that I can say what I don't like without feeling guilty about it. My mama didn't like that word pass either. When she was 90 years old, she said to me, "I know I'm not long for this world. And when my time comes, I don't want you to say that I passed away." Jesus, when he died, people just said he died on the cross. They didn't say he passed away on the cross. So why is everybody so afraid of that word? And I don't want you to say that you lost me either, because you know exactly where I'm going to be. I just want you to say that I lived a good life and I died. Oh, and be sure you eat as much of that good funeral food as you can at my funeral dinner. You promised me that? And I did. You see, my mama dearly loved funeral food. She loved to eat it, and she also loved to cook it. She told me when I was young that every woman, when she gets old enough to have her own kitchen and smart enough that she knows how to cook, that she ought to develop her own signature recipe for funeral food. And she'll take it to every single funeral she attends, because you see, the folks who are grieving, who are sad, they need something to look forward to. Now, my mama's signature funeral dish was a spaghetti casserole. Now, I know you've probably eaten a lot of spaghetti casseroles in your lifetime. I have too. The one we most commonly see show up at big dinners is a chicken spaghetti casserole. It's made with chicken and spaghetti, of course, and usually some tomatoes, and then it's all held together by Velveeta cheese. That was not my mama's spaghetti casserole. First of all, my mama hated Velveeta cheese. She said, "You might as well eat a can of car wax." No, my mama's spaghetti casserole was made with steak. She would get a great big slab of round steak, and she would pound it out real thin. Then she'd cut it up in little tiny pieces, and she would brown that steak in some hot bacon grease. And then just before it was done, golden brown, she would throw in a couple of handfuls of chopped up garlic. She'd mix up that steak with some spaghetti and some home canned tomatoes, and then she'd put some cheddar cheese on the top. Oh, it was delicious, and you could smell it long before you saw it. And of course, it was always the first dish to go empty at every funeral that she took it to. After you ate a big plateful of it, of course, you would have skunk breath for the rest of the day or a couple of days afterwards. But nobody cared because they knew that their loved one had been honored by that food. Now, the only other fake food that my mama hated as much as she hated Velveeta cheese was Cool Whip. One time, we were at a funeral for my great-aunt Nanny Jo, and my cousin Charlene showed up with a dish. It was a green congealed salad. Well, my mama thought it looked delicious, so she asked Charlene what was in it, and Charlene explained that, well, you start out with some lime jello, and then you add some pineapple and some pecans, and then a couple of cups of Cool Whip. Well, my mama stopped her right then. She lit into her. She said it was just a crying shame after all that Aunt Nanny Jo had done for Charlene. Every time Charlene had a baby, Aunt Nanny Jo would knit this pretty little blanket and some booties and a little bonnet for that baby. And now Charlene didn't even have the wherewithal to mix up real food to bring to Aunt Nanny Jo's funeral. Well, I can't speak for Charlene, but I surely never used Cool Whip ever again. Now, when I got old enough that I had my own kitchen and I was learning how to cook, I had occasion to attend my Uncle Henry's funeral. My mama called me up a couple of days before and she asked me what food I was bringing to the dinner. And I told her, well, I was thinking about bringing this bundt cake that a neighbor of mine had given me a recipe for. I had tasted hers and it was real good. My mama said, well, what's it got in it? I said, well, you start with a box of Duncan Hines yellow cake mix. Oh, my mama stopped me right then. She said, hold on just a minute. Duncan Hines don't know squat about making real cake. Have you looked at the list of ingredients on the side of that box? Why, it's as long as the book of Revelation. And you can't even understand what half of them are. You can't pronounce them. Why would you want to eat food like that? Baby, it is not that hard to make real food. All you need to make a cake is just some flour and some sugar and some eggs. It's not that hard. And so that night I got out my Betty Crocker cookbook that I'd gotten for a wedding present from one of my aunts. And I found a recipe that I was able to follow. My neighbor grew a lot of zucchini, and she was always leaving it on my porch, and so I used some fresh zucchini, and I mixed it up with some flour and sugar and eggs, and I put in some pecans that I'd gathered up in the backyard where our pecan tree was. And the next day when I showed up at my uncle's funeral, I had homemade zucchini bread. My mama was so proud of me. She and all my relatives just waxed poetic about how delicious it was and how they would look forward to it at every funeral after that. Now, one of the few certainties that we all have in life is that someday someone we love dearly is going to go and die on us. And we can think of that day as the soul-crushing event it will be, and we can dread it. Or we can decide right now that when it happens, we're going to honor that person who has died with delicious food and sweet stories about their life. It happened for me when my mama died. She was 91 and a half years old. Most of what happened that day and the days that followed was so gut-wrenching and soul-crushing and heartbreaking that I really have repressed most of those memories. But I do remember this. I remember her funeral dinner. To say that there was a ton of food would be a gross understatement. I know there were at least a half a dozen 8-foot tables filled with homemade food. Hundreds of people came to her funeral, and the delicious dinner afterwards. My nose led me to one large casserole dish at the corner of one of those tables. I smelled it, I looked at it, I recognized it. It was my mama's steak spaghetti casserole, full of garlic. I picked it up, and I took that entire dish into the kitchen, and I hid it at the back of one of the shelves. I know I should feel guilty about that now, but like I said, I've repressed most of my feelings and memories from that time. When the dinner was over and everybody had left, I went into the kitchen and I took out that steak spaghetti casserole. I knew who had brought it. It was my cousin, Charlene. I sat down in a rocking chair, and I took a big spoon, and I ate that entire casserole all by myself, one spoonful at a time. And it wasn't because I was hungry, because I wasn't. It was because it gave me one more hour to spend with my mama. And the blessed spirit of garlic surrounded us. My mama didn't pass away, and I didn't lose her either. She's still with me. She's here, and she's here. My mama, Carrie Martin McBride, lived a good life, and she died.
Our excellent sponsors made this year's festival possible, and they brought it to you. And now your donations will help Camp Bethel survive continued pandemic-related losses. So thank you. Give, please, by using the donor buttons or links on this page. And you can tip the tellers too.
We hope the festival will be back home in person next year and need your help in getting the camp ready to reopen as soon as possible for summer camps, guest groups, and special events like the festival. Please click on the link below and make your contribution toward the work, the fun, and the fellowship that find a home at Camp Bethel. Thanks for watching, and thank you for your gift.